Hello, friends. It's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and happy Resurrection Day. We all have a reason to rejoice today in the resurrection of our Savior Jesus. And this week it was spring break here at our homestead. This is the 1 week between January and the end of June that we have off from doing homeschool work. So for a homeschool mom, this is my week to just knock off projects. So I did a lot of planning this week and catching up on things like making new chore lists and organizing next year's homeschool curriculum, lots of things like that. I also took this week as an opportunity to catch up on lots of housework, just projects around the house that had been piling up, closets reorganized, areas deep cleaned, just such a lovely chance to do those types of things. And then we also took some time to do some homestead work, some projects on the homestead that needed to be accomplished. And so I'm going to take you through in this video and show you what we got done in the kitchen, outside on the homestead in the garden, and also just some other little projects around the house. So if that interests you, why don't you stick around? The first thing that needed my attention this week were these batches of homemade vinegar that I started sometime between last August and September, maybe some of it in October. And I have a couple different types of vinegar. They were all down brewing in the cellar, and I saw them this week when I was down there and thought I should bring them up and deal with them, see if they're ready to be bottled up. So there's 2 different types of vinegar here. Some of this is apple scrap vinegar, and some of this is pure apple cider vinegar. And the difference is that the apple scrap vinegar was started just with apple cores and apple scraps that I used during the canning process last summer, late summer, early fall. And then the plastic jugs here, these are just batches of apple cider, raw apple cider that I put in the jug and allowed to ferment to turn into apple cider vinegar. So I have the 2 different kinds, and what I need to do is go through these to see if they are ready to be bottled up. You could see that I was pulling this big, white, thick, slimy, pancake-looking thing out of the jug before I pour the vinegar out. That is called the mother of vinegar. That's the colony of bacteria that helps to ferment and brew the vinegar. And we save all those. I'm putting all of those into a jar, and we will use that mother of vinegar to get a jump start on future batches of vinegar. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to start a new batch here in a minute. But all I'm doing is pouring out the finished vinegar here. I started with the apple scrap vinegar, and then I'm going to work through the apple cider. And really, to bottle it up, all I need to do is pour it into a clean jar, and then we'll put a lid on it, and that will slow down the process. Here is one of those mothers of vinegar from this batch, and each jar has maybe 1 or 2 big mothers that we can save. And so I'm just trying to fill up as many jars with this vinegar as possible. Now I started this apple scrap vinegar probably 2 months before I started the apple cider vinegar. So I'm just giving the apple cider jugs a sniff to see if they're ready. That's kind of how I can tell whether or not the fermentation process is complete. I sniff it, and if it's giving me that strong vinegar smell, then I know that it's ready to go. If I'm not getting a really strong vinegar smell, like I didn't get a strong smell from one of these jugs, I'm going to set that aside and put it back into the cellar and let it continue to ferment for a little bit longer. And I'm running that apple cider vinegar through a filter to collect any solids that might have accumulated in it. Now I'm going to start a new batch of vinegar. If you guys will remember, I was processing the last of our apples from storage last month, maybe a month or 2 ago, and I didn't have any sugar because we were in the middle of a pantry challenge, and so I decided to just put all of those apple cores into a bag and put them in the freezer to use later. So what I'm doing is adding a mother of vinegar to a big glass gallon jar. I put in approximately 2/3 to 3/4 a cup of raw sugar there, poured in just a little bit of a previous batch of vinegar to give it a kickstart, and then I'm going to fill my jar the rest of the way with some of these apple cores. I actually have enough cores here that I can start 2 more batches of apple scrap vinegar. And so I'll do the same thing here. Just put in a mother of vinegar, add a little bit of vinegar from a previous batch, put in 2/3 to 3/4 a cup of sugar, and then fill it the rest of the way with some of those apple cores. Then all I need to do is fill the jar all the way to the top with some water. And I just use water straight from our tap. We have well water, and that works really well. I'm just going to stir those cores around to make sure any little seeds or bits that might be in them are going to come loose and float to the top. You really want to make sure that you remove any solids that would be floating. Seeds in particular are really the biggest culprit of causing your vinegar to mold. So I'm removing any little seeds and things that float. And then we're going to submerge all of those solids to put them under the water line. I just put a small canning jar on the top it with a coffee filter, and then I'm going to set these in my kitchen. I just put them up on top of my kitchen cabinets, and we're going to let those solids sit in there and start brewing for about 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, we'll remove those apple cores, and then when we're done, we will have the start of our apple scrap vinegar that then can be put down in the cellar to finish its second ferment. And it will take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. It just kind of depends on the conditions and the temperature in the cellar. So now I have my new batch of vinegar started, and I have last year's batches all ready to go here. You can see the difference in color between the lighter colored apple scrap vinegar over here and then the darker colored apple cider vinegar. But all of these have health benefits. They all taste delicious. A lot of people ask what we use these for. I'll use them to make salad dressings, lots of reasons to use apple cider or apple scrap vinegar in the kitchen for culinary reasons. But another main thing that we do with these vinegars is use them for animals, especially when we're raising baby chicks, which next week I plan to put some eggs in the incubator to start a new batch of chicks. And when those chicks are born, we add a little bit of vinegar to their water every day, and that keeps them healthy, gives them a boost, a little probiotic boost, and also helps prevent things like pasty butt that can really make the chicks sick. So I want to get all stocked up on my vinegars here to be ready for when our chicks will hatch in the next month. So I'm very excited about that. This jar of Mother's vinegar that I saved, I'll just set that up in storage, and then the next time I want to start some vinegar later this year, I will have Mother's ready to go. My next project this week was to deal with these sweet potatoes that were actually starting to sprout in storage, which is rare for me for that to happen. So I decided, since they're already sprouting, why not go ahead and try to make some sweet potato slips out of the rest of these sweet potatoes. So in order to do that, all I'm doing is suspending the sweet potatoes using toothpicks in a jar of water. So you want the sweet potato kind of half submerged in the water, and it will begin to form roots in the jar, and then sprouts will form out of the top of the sweet potato. And those are called sweet potato slips that then we can use to grow sweet potatoes in this year's garden. And I'm doing quite a few because I notoriously get poor results from starting slips. So the more I start, the better chance that I have success. And then any extras that I have plenty of friends that garden in my area that will put those sweet potatoes slips to use. So just trying to find a way to use up those sweet potatoes that are sprouting and turn them into more food in this year's garden. So speaking of this year's garden, thankfully the snow that you saw outside of the window at the beginning of the week melted, and it was rather chilly outside later in the week, but it was nice enough that I was able to get outside in the garden and do some work. And there is a lot of work to be done, you guys. Last fall, I just was extremely burned out after canning season. And when school and extracurricular activities started up in the fall, there was just literally no steam left in me to push through and get the garden cleaned up. It was physically impossible for me without working myself to sickness. So I just left everything in the garden And now is the time of year that I need to deal with the mess that I left. Now, the wildlife around me doesn't view it as a mess. Leaving everything in the garden was great for the pollinators and gave them plenty of places to overwinter. And so hopefully when those pollinators hatch this year, they will help me in my garden and thank me for letting them have a habitat to live in over the winter. But in the meantime, I need to get busy just pulling out all of the dead plants, dealing with some of the weeds that are already starting to form, adding some compost to my garden beds to get them ready for planting, and doing things like that. So this week's goal was to get enough of the garden prepared so that I could plant potatoes and onions, because here in my garden, Zone 6 here in northwestern Ohio, it is time for me to be planting those items. Now, last year I ordered really fancy, expensive organic seed potato from a company, and I didn't get any better results than I do just buying them locally at some place like Tractor Supply. And I got these bags of seed potato discounted at Tractor Supply and just decided to go ahead and get those. And hopefully I will have good results this year. I have this small area of my garden that isn't raised beds that I use for planting things in ground, like potatoes. I also have some perennial onion bunches that kind of grow in this area that you can see popping up. And I'm just doing 2 small bags of potatoes in this area this year. And then I will fill a couple of my raised beds with potatoes also. We do not have enough garden space to grow all of the potatoes that we need for the year. I downsized my garden just for my own sanity, knowing my limits a couple years ago. And so potatoes are one of those things that I just grow enough to have for fresh eating during the growing season and to do some canning projects. And then I purchase our potatoes for eating from Azure Standard for the rest of the year. Showing you the straw that I left out in the garden over the winter to kind of be in the elements. And I do that because by springtime, when I want to use this straw as mulch, it is just full of earthworms. The earthworms kind of go in there during the winter, fill the straw, and then that just benefits my garden beds this spring. So putting my potatoes in the ground, covering with a nice layer of straw, I find that I don't have to hill my potatoes if I just cover it with a lot of straw. And it's just a really hands-off, easy method to grow potatoes for my family. Okay, the next job that I'm focusing on is getting these beds prepped for planting onions. So my goal with onions is to grow enough for my family for the whole year, and we were successful in doing that last year. What I do to plant them is I take a little muffin tin like this and press it down into the soil, and that is how I space my onions when I plant them. I space them rather close together, and I find that doing that helps with the weeds and also gives me the perfect size bulbs that I want for my family. And so once I press the muffin tins into the ground, I have my little onion starts here, and we're going to place them one per hole that the muffin tin made. Now I get these starts from a friend here locally. These are Patterson onions. They are great variety for storage. These are what we grew last year, and the onions lasted in storage until about a month or so ago, and they were starting to sprout. And then I was able to slice up and freeze dry the rest of those onions, and we're still working through those freeze-dried onion slices now and adding them to meals. So it really worked out well. I find that if I grow enough onions like that to get me through to maybe April, then the onion greens from all of these plants and some of my perennial onion, like walking onions and bunching onions, are already growing. And I'll use the onion greens in my cooking until we can harvest bulbs again this summer. So it really works out well. And this is the variety I planted last year with great results. I'm very excited to do it again. I will do 2 beds this size that you see here with the onions, and then I have a couple bunches left that I'm going to plant throughout the garden as companion plants with other crops that I'm putting in raised beds. So I do some companion planting. There are things like strawberries that really benefit from having onions in the bed with them. Because they either attract beneficial insects or having the onions there repel some insects and pests that would damage the other crops. So that is what I was able to plant this week, and I'm just trying to clean up all my trellises, get the rest of the beds whipped into shape, because next week I will hopefully be planting more strawberries and asparagus and a couple of other items that I'm ready to get in the ground. And hopefully next week the weather will be a little bit better. It was so windy on this day that whoop, my camera fell over. So yeah, I'm just ready for better weather, ready to get out in the sunshine and really tackle the rest of this garden. In a few weeks to, I guess maybe next month, you're not going to recognize this place. Lord willing, it's just going to be gorgeous. We're back inside and I'm ready to work on another project. I noticed we were out of hand soap in our downstairs bathroom, and so I'm going to make some hand soap. I thought I would show you guys my process for doing so. So this is some homemade Castile soap that I made a couple years ago, and I have this special cheese grater that I keep with my soap making supplies that I use only for soap making and for this purpose. And so I just cut that 1 bar of soap up into small pieces, and then I can run it through this cheese grater, and then we will boil down all of these flakes of soap to make a liquid soap. So this works really well for me. I noticed that 1 bar of soap to 1 gallon of water is a good amount to get a thick soap that isn't so thick that you're going to have trouble getting it to come out of your hand pumps for your soap dispensers. I've done it before where I've done a little more than 1 bar of soap to a gallon of water, and it was so thick that it made a mess, especially with little children trying to use the soap dispenser. So I like it not completely solid, a little watery still, and that works well for my children. So we added 1 gallon of water to this. We're going to stir it around, and then I'm going to put it on the stove and just bring it to a boil quickly. And as soon as it boils, I'll take it off the heat, and then I give it about 24 hours for the soap to thicken up and completely set before we'll start using it for various reasons. This is what it looked like the next morning after sitting out for about 12 to 16 hours. You can see it's really thickening up, and now it's ready to add some scents. So what I do is take essential oils. I'm using lavender for this particular batch, and we're just gonna put some in the top. I don't really measure it out. I don't have a set number of drops that I use. I just use enough so that I can smell it when I stir it around. It's really important to wait to add those oils till after it cools. If you add it to your boiling pot of water, you're just going to heat the oils and they're going to dissipate and you're not going to have a very good scent. Now I can add my soap to my hand dispenser that goes in our downstairs bathroom, and we can use this now for washing our hands in the bathroom. The rest of the soap I decided to use to make some homemade cleaning wipes. So these are some old diapers. These are just diaper flats, and I never really liked, when I was cloth diapering, using this type of diaper. So these were just sitting in the drawer. They had really never been used. They're clean and they're bleached, and I thought they would make good cleaning rags because they're just sitting there not being used. So I decided to roll them up into kind of like paper towels, cloth paper towels, and then I'm going to shove that into a glass gallon jar and pour some of my liquid soap over the top of it. And then I have some soapy cleaning rags that I can use. I told you that this week I was doing quite a bit of cleaning around the house, so it was really convenient to just have a jar of soapy rags that I could use to wipe down the kitchen cabinets and clean up messes. I mean, I just did a ton of cleaning this week and was really happy to have the convenience of these rags ready to go. And so this soap also makes a really gentle cleanser for babies. I love to use this as shampoo for Hannah right now. I just love making my own liquid soaps. It saves me so much money. So hopefully you find that helpful. And I'm hoping to soon get to a tutorial on how I make my bars of soap. I just didn't get to that this winter yet, and hopefully I can find some time before gardening season really picks up. So next week we are back to school, our last push. We have 11 weeks until the end of the school year. I'm glad that I tackled most of the projects that were just kind of piling up and hanging over my head during the school year. And so I feel like I can focus now on hitting the books and finishing our school year strong. Next week, I'll be back in the kitchen with you to do some fun cooking projects. Until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I hope you're having a wonderful Resurrection Day and enjoying time with your family and friends, just celebrating all of the wonderful blessings that we have through the resurrection. All right, friends, bye.